Welcome to the Dignity Dialogue with your host, Joe Kiedinger.
Hi, everyone. This is Joe Kiedinger with another Dignity Dialogue. And, of course, I am here, my co-host, April Strom-Johnson. Say hello, April.
Hello, everybody.
Okay. I'm excited particularly today because we're talking about servant leadership and the power of servant leadership. Often misunderstood, but I think in today's world, it's now become a very aware, people have heard of this term. When we started studying it 20 years ago, it was often misunderstood.
Yeah,
this
for
idea
sure.
of servant leadership. But our whole company, Dignify, was established on the servant leadership principles, and it was the inspiration behind servant leadership to why we are even talking to you today in this forum with Dignity Dialogue. So I'm really excited about this
I know,
particular.
this is cool.
Yeah, this is going back.
This is neat. So again, of course, we've been doing this as some episodes, right? So this is just one of the many episodes that you've been listening to wrapped around this whole idea of leading and the power of leading other people. And so we dug up some information, right? So let's just talk a little bit, starting with the definition of servant leadership. What is servant leadership? It's really a philosophy. People would say it's a style, and I think that kind of works too. But it's a philosophy where your main goal is really the leader serving. Yeah. So we talk about leadership being a servant role, and that's really where that comes from. It's different than traditional leadership, where leaders' main focus is really the thriving of the company, getting the goals met, getting all of those things growing and scaling and all that good stuff. Where a servant leadership really kind of shares the power. A servant leader is looking for ways to really grow and empower their employee first. It really helps to develop your employees. So there's a different end game, if you will, with servant leadership. So servant leadership folks are very strong in things like empathy and active listening and good stewardship. And,
goal setting.
Yes, goal setting, not just for themselves and for the company, but helping their employees goal set for their own personal growth as well.
And the company.
Yeah.
It has to go both ways.
Yep.
They believe that you need to be a plow horse, not a show horse. And that everyone has a ability to bring the company to the next level. And so that was, and I would say if we divide those two words, servant and leadership, and we just define those two words, right? Leadership is the ability to influence others, right? If you're in a position of power, I mean, you can tell people what to do all day long. That's power, and you'll get maybe a couple seasons out of that. But leadership is they feel a part of it. They have a specific role to play. They're held accountable to their role. They're also celebrated as a unique individual. And then the servant part is often misunderstood. At least it used to be back in the days, where servant, snap your finger and I want a glass of water. This type of servitude. And what it really means is meeting legitimate needs, not wants.
Yeah.
So meeting legitimate needs, not wants. Mm-hmm. And so that's really the idea of being a true servant leader. It's the leader who serves. I'm here to serve you, and then you serve down, and you serve down. And it takes the traditional triangle of an organization and kind of flips upside down, where everyone is serving up, and who's at the very top is the customer.
Right.
Right.
Which I love.
Yeah. Especially in a service industry, especially in that industry, if you want the customer to feel loved and treated with excellence, then you must first treat the team with love and excellence.
I think that was actually the first thing that really clicked for me with servant leadership and really propelled me forward in wanting to be that kind of leader. I know I use a phrase around here from time to time that says, for me personally, as a leader, my first client is my team. That's how I look at it. Yeah. Right? And if I am serving my team well, my team will serve our clients so well. Yeah. And everything that we want to see happen and grow. And so I try to focus. And that was I remember really like grabbing on to this idea of servant leadership when our buddy, who I adore so much, of course, Tom Thibodeau.
Oh, yes.
You know, like when he came and he taught about servant leadership, it's one of those, you know, from our slow meetings way back
Yes.
when, right?
Servant Leaders of Wisconsin.
Yes.
Just so those who don't know what that slow
Servant
stands
Leaders
for.
of Wisconsin.
Just slow down to speed up. We
Yes.
have these sessions quarterly.
When he came in and trained for the first time, that was one of the first times that I came to an event before I even worked here. And
right.
I heard him train and I thought, who is this guy? Like, I need more time with this guy.
Oh, he's
this
like-
makes sense.
He's like America's grandpa. I mean, and the thing with Tom, there aren't a lot of videos of him. He's, unless someone else took it, he's not this like social media guru. But man, you watch Tom Thibodeau do his thing, and your heart gets, I don't know if transformed, but it brings out the best in everyone.
It really does.
And he calls himself the minister of goodness.
Yes. And it was just so impactful for me that I was like, that's the kind of leader I want to be. I want to be that leader.
Well, and to give a little background for our viewers, Tom is the director of the Servant Leadership Master's Program at Viterbo University, which is a small private school of about, I think, 4,500, 3,500, I don't know, around there, individuals, students in La Crosse, Wisconsin, so on the western side of the state, which is about 3 hours from where we are. And Tom started that program, I believe, and you guys can Google it, I believe it's the only Masters of Servant Leadership that you go to in person. I think you can get some online, like you could do it online, perhaps otherwise, but it is magical. And he does executives who fly in for an intense, I think it's like so many weeks. I don't even know, 5, 6, 7 weeks, but it's intense. You stay there. And these executives might fly back on the weekends, but they get their masters in a short amount of time because of their jobs. But he is, I would say we are a hotbed of servant leadership in Wisconsin because of Tom, because it's the only university, that promotes it. And so it's well known here. It's also well known in Texas.
Isn't that something?
Yeah. And what the servant leadership folks who follow all that say is they do a study on how many people say servant leadership in their website, because it's the only way you can track it.
Oh.
Right. So you can do a search. Do they mention servant leadership of some sort within the context? And Texas has the highest population of literally throwing it out there and talking about it. Now their state is huge.
Everything's bigger in Texas.
Everything's bigger in Texas. But anyway, and so we've had a lot of clients start out in Texas as we were doing our job.
That's true. And that makes sense. I never actually put that together.
Yeah, they get it. They get it. And so if you think about this idea of, if you bring it to the business world, I would say the commonality of servant leadership would be what Toyota brought to the world in the 60s and 70s, this first idea of saying there's this road we follow. We have operations down one path of the road, and right below it you have culture. And there's a story, if you look at the Toyota operating system, you'll hear stories of the Ford folks when Toyota came to America, right? If you remember, everything was cheap, made out of Japan. If it was made out of Japan, and it was just cheap. It was cheap stuff. And Toyota flipped that on its head. And how they were able to produce these cars that run forever. I mean, even today,
literally,
these cars run a long time, well made. The Ford folks were confused on how they could be making such an impact so fast in an automobile market, which has been so historical, right? When the whole 1900s, pretty much. And so the Ford folks reached out to the Toyota folks and said, "Can we take a tour of your facility?" Of which they said, "Sure." And many of the Toyota executives were like, "Why are you letting them in here?" Right? And the leader at the time said, "Well, because they're not going to see what makes us different." And sure enough, the Ford folks came in and saw all the same machines, the same technology, pretty much the same production lines. What they saw looked not much different than the Ford plant. But what they didn't see is the idea of servant leadership running in it, culture. This is where Kaizen events and lean manufacturing came in, where we brought the people in to have a say on how to make this better. And you know who started even before them with that? Walt Disney. This idea.
Wow.
Disney would ask the folks running. Now, remember, the park started in the 50s in Disneyland. And he has plus the show as one of their core values, right? They have safety, capacity, courtesy, and plus the show. Those are their 4 main core values. Meaning that if you're going to run a ride, like the Pirates of the Caribbean or something, we want you to speak into, even for the smallest improvement, how could we improve this experience? Not only for the guest, but for you as well, who's running the ride. And so it used to be the Imagineers that would make all the decisions. And the story I remember best, which I love, is back when, they might still have it, I'm not sure, but these big gondolas on the wire that bring you from one side of the park to the next.
Okay.
You know, it can seat like maybe 5 or 6 people in it. They wanted to improve it. It was time to improve it. And he asked, Imagineers were designing how the new gondolas might look. And he goes, well, have you ever asked the person running the ride how the new gondola should be? And so they brought in, this young person who was running the ride, and they said, well, I noticed that tall people, when you opened the door, there was a frame, right, like a door. And he said a lot of tall people would bang their head on the top of the frame. Well, they didn't have the information. So if you could create a door that has no crossbar, you keep them in, but it's just open air, and that's what they did.
Sure enough.
So even way back in the day before Toyota, there were servant leaders out there trying to get people involved in making great decisions.
I love that.
Yeah.
And that is a key difference between servant leadership and traditional leadership, that involvement piece.
Yes.
Right? Always wanting to understand the perspective from your people, from the people doing.
That's exactly right.
Right?
Which I was inspired 20 years ago by Dave Scogan of Festival Foods. Okay, have a servant leadership culture, and his son Mark brings it to this day forward, and they've scaled, and they used to have 4 locations when I met them, and now they have over 40 and growing.
Isn't that wild?
Based on this idea. So I had a front row seat getting to know Tom Thibodeau. That's where I met him. James Hunter, who wrote the book The Servant, which sold millions and millions of copies across the globe, and became friends with these amazing people. And that's where I thought in my head, how to create a system around servant leadership.
Tell a little more about that.
Well, in the day, and even today, if you ever follow any sort of leadership information, out there, there's usually podcasts like now. You're learning about servant leadership right now. Okay?
Hi, welcome to ours.
Yeah, here's about servant leadership. And about any sort of leadership, you learn about it. Watching a speaker, you can learn what it is, you can learn why it's important, and they tell you lots of stories.
Sure.
You can read about it, and you can hear stories. You can understand the why and the what. But what I found missing, an important ingredient, is how do I do it? So unless you had a real impassionate manager or something that could just kind of make it their own and try to create their own systems, that's the only way it would take off, creating systems around it. But there's no blueprint to say what the system is. Like if you're going to buy a car, they have a blueprint to build the car, right? And so you know that the car is reliable.
Yeah.
There's been no reliable system in place. So we talk about, you just mentioned, getting people involved and what they're good at. That's how Dignify was inspired. Understanding my stepson Alex was the inspiration. It also then led to servant leadership and why we brought it into the field, because there was no way to understand truly what motivates you and how you can bring your best to this job. Right? Because we're so focused on skill set. We're so focused on training how to do your job. But if you saw when you can see the heart of an individual and kind of a window into their world, this dignity code that we created, to understand how they're wired and what motivates them, that is a major part of the system.
And
that was the first piece of the
that's
system.
Awesome.
It was the first piece of our culture operating system.
I love that. And there's really, that is really that first step into, I think, continual improvement. Right?
Absolutely.
If we do something the same way all the time, because that's how we learn to do it, that's how we do it, right? We never get a different perspective, right? What I have really picked up on, especially with some of our clients that we have, it's so impressive because the person that figures out how we could do something better, right, isn't necessarily the CEO of the company or the director of operations. It's like the dude on the 3rd floor in the midnight shift that figures out this isn't as efficient as you think it is.
That's right.
Right? how cool that opening up and allowing that young man or that young woman to be heard and see their perspective then feeds into the efficiency of what you're doing, which ultimately brings you to a goal of having a better product, running more efficiently, and ultimately having maybe a better return on your investment.
It is unquestioned that when you grow your culture, your business will grow. Matter of fact, studies that Lencioni did, who's known for the 5 dysfunctions of the team and the advantage, organizational health.
So smart.
He says 3-to-1. Their research has shown a 3-to-1 comparison businesses, the folks who have incorporated servant leadership, culture, and made culture a system, not just an idea, within their organization were 3-to-1 times more profitable. Doesn't it just make sense? So you get these, mathematical people like, well, okay, so it just started to improve. That could just be the economy. Are you listening to yourself? Like, when you make a change for the better, things improve. That's your metric. Mm-hmm. Matter of fact, I will tell you, and we know this, most leadership companies this day will tell you that they don't really have a metric to improve it. Right? It's hard to improve. So it's a feeling. Like, it just feels better. It feels this. It feels that. We're challenging that. Mm-hmm. We're challenging that. We now go into companies and go, give me your metrics. So we'll build the servant leadership culture as long as the executives support it. They have to support it. But you know who executes it? Your managers and supervisors and
Absolutely.
your team.
Yep.
They're the ones who execute it, and the executives must support it.
Correct.
Right? So you support it financially, you support it by looking at the metrics. And so what these executives do now is give us some metrics. What do you want? What do you want to improve? Got it. We will build the culture operating system around those metrics. So there's no question. Like, this is what we want to do. Here's how we're going to do it. We're going to help them strategize better, help them grow strategy. We'll help them understand their people, put them on the right seats in the bus to be successful. Mm-hmm. By the way, Einstein said, at least he's credited to this. Okay, there's still a question if it's really his quote.
But it feels like Einstein.
I don't know. He has a lot of great ones. Yeah. But he is credited with saying, you can expect a fish to climb a tree, but its whole life will feel a failure.
Right.
What happens with a culture operating system is the driving motivations, the driving force of all human beings. So now you can have a fish swim in the pond and you can move your monkeys back in the tree, if we're using an animal metaphor.
Right.
Let your rhinos be rhinos. Now I'm just going off on a tangent. Let kangaroos.
Let people do what they're good at.
That's right. Think about that. Think about an ecosystem. Just having this epiphany right now. Can a kangaroo exist in Africa?
I think so.
They have to be in Australia.
Oh.
If you think about ecosystem, can a fish exist on dry land?
No.
Right? Those are black and white. But even think about cultures of like African animals living somewhere else, right?
Right. Elephants don't live in
northern Wisconsin.
Exactly.
Right? It gets freezing.
Gosh, I wish they did.
Yeah.
I love them so much.
Except in zoos where you can climate control, right? All these things. But in the wild, there is a space. Even at zoos, they put a certain environment with every unique animal.
Absolutely.
Human beings have certain needs as well. Like, if I'm not motivated to be around people, then I need my own office. It can be as simple as that. Yeah. I can do better if I'm just private in my office. If I am motivated with people, guess what? I actually thrive and am more productive if I'm working alongside others. Mm-hmm. If I'm more built to be chill and kind of peaceful and laid back, I'm really content doing the same task over and over again. No problem on a production line. But if I'm like wired for never a dull moment or moves quick to action or a little bit of fun, I need variety, right?
Yeah.
So you want to move me all over the place. Well, the challenge is usually takes about 3 months, 6 months, a year, or maybe it's not even seen. This person isn't even seen for who they are. Well, guess what? They quit.
Right. Or you let them go. And
'cause you're frustrated.
They might have been the best fit for something else in your company that you had no idea about. But you didn't, if you don't take the time, right, to really get to know somebody, to really get to know how they're wired, what really drives them, are they sitting on the right seat on the bus? Mm-hmm. You may ask somebody to leave the bus that you wish had never left the bus.
Right.
Too. There's that side of it as well. It's not just that they leave, but you may just simply not have found the right spot for them. And I know we have experienced that with clients of ours that we have said, can we just try something?
Yeah.
Before you let Joe go,
Yep.
whoever that is, right? Can we just try something? Let's shift him to a different area.
Yeah.
And let's just see if we see some improvement in behavior. Let's see if we see, a little bit more of himself come to life. And we have seen that.
Yeah.
And it's exciting.
It's exciting. When you know the driving force of a human being, it's game over. And you know what? Sometimes they don't fit into the culture.
Right.
And you know what? You're liberating them. Just so you know, a true servant leader gives you what you need, not what you want. And sometimes what a person needs is to be let go.
Absolutely.
So that they can find their passion. I mean, life is short, you guys. Why would you allow someone to stick around to be mediocre only to find out in an economic downturn they have to be let go? Now they're, let's say, 50 years old or older and wondering who else is going to want me. And I've just kind of was living a hollow existence for 20 years. Yeah, I made a living, but, there's a great story of that too from Dave. He let someone go who was one of the best produce people in this grocery store. That's what Festival Foods is. And he had lowest shrink in the company, meaning, vegetables you have to throw away because they
Sure.
only last a certain way. He was good at displays. He was good at managing the stuff. But one thing that festival Dave required, was a 10-tile rule. You have to greet
Yes.
people within 10 floor tiles.
I
'Cause
love that.
Dave said our food's no different really than anyone else, and we have to treat our customer service has to be the best if we're going to win. And so he would not 10-tile, therefore his people wouldn't greet people. Now they knew this because servant leaders are accountable. They use their cameras and everything, their department on theft, right? The theft department, to watch, and they'd have to do 10-tile reports. Because if you don't inspect it, you don't inspect it. How would you know? So everything's trackable, right? That's what Dave taught me. You got to track everything. If you're going to start something, now you've got to track it so that you can help coach and train people to just keep her going. It's easy to fall back. Well, he ended up letting the person go because he gave him 3 warnings, and he just said, I'm just not a people person. And about 3 years later, that individual came back looking for Dave. Of course, he's hiding under the desk. Does he have a gun? Where's Dave Scogan? And the gentleman shared with him sincere gratitude for letting him go. And he said, I would have stayed my rest of my career here, but my passion's bicycling. And I have started a bike shop.
Wow.
In a different state where he was originally from. So I got to move back home, and now I have 3 bike shops. In the last 3 years, it's just boomed. And you taught me customer service, and now guess what? I 10-tile because I get it.
I love that.
I get it now, right? But because you let me go, I'm thriving. And I think that is getting people what they need. It's all about that too. It's not about saving people for the company. No one needs to be saved. You're giving them the opportunity to thrive.
Yes.
It's their choice to thrive. This isn't a one-way street.
Yep.
And you're giving them the best chance to survive when you know their driving force, what drives them. You're in the right position. They have clear objectives. They get to speak into how they're going to make something better. And you track it. And now all that has to be put into a system. And so how to say that doesn't create metrics that rise?
Right.
It would be illogical and not honest.
And isn't that the space that, as a leader, to be able to lead in that kind of space,
Yeah.
as a servant leader, the sky is the limit for the way that you can empower people, encourage people. It's just, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
If you want to get started on the journey of understanding servant leadership, I recommend, it's an anecdotal story if you like to read stories about it versus technicalities about it, and that is The Servant by James Hunter. It's a great read. That's just a story around a monk who has a retreat house at the monastery, and these different characters come in to learn about it. It's just a fun way and a delightful way to get your toe wet in servant leadership. If you're ready to get after creating a culture operating system, actually get it systematized, give us a call.
Yeah.
We'll absolutely talk to you about that. It is customized because all companies are a little different.
Yeah.
We have to understand how you're wired and how you're laid out. But it will absolutely transform your company to help it reach its full potential. So servant leadership, it is not a a fad. It is not a gimmick. It is the real deal. So thank you for tuning in today for another Dignity Dialogue with April and Joe.
This has been the Dignity Dialogue with Joe Kiedinger. Talk at you later.